Hello Silhouetters, it is Anna, and today I have a tutorial to show you how I use the basic shape tools in Silhouette to build simple shapes that I want to make. So I'm thinking about a mitten today, and this is kind of a preview of where I'm going. This is a shape I've already made, and after I made it, I thought, oh, this would make a good tutorial. So this is kind of a preview of where I'm going. I'm going to use the basic shape tools here and build myself a mitten. So let me move these out of the way, and I'm going to show you what my process would be. So I'm going to usually start, I'm going to choose a shape that is simple and is made up of shapes I recognize, like rounded rectangles, ovals, squares, etc., and think about how those shapes, visualize how those shapes go together to form what I'm trying to make. So I've got a reference picture here of a mitten. It's a good idea to have a reference picture nearby that you can look at. A lot of times I will even have my Google Images open so that I can scroll through and look at some different options and just be looking. You know, here I see kind of a oval or an egg shape, maybe attached to a rectangle here that flares out a little bit at the side. And all those are adjustments that I can make as I go. I notice some of these mittens are wider at the top, some are not as wide, some are longer mittens, shorter mittens. The thumb part might be sticking out more or less, so I can see some different options here. So I'm going to start looking at this mitten, and I'm not trying to make the exact same shape that I made before. Hopefully you'll get an idea of how you can use something else you've seen as an inspiration and not always have to trace or exactly copy it. So I'm going to look at this mitten, and I know before I used an oval for this part of the mitten, but now that I'm looking at this one, I think it's maybe more of a rounded rectangle. So that's where I'm going to start. To make the main fingers part of the mitten, I'm going to make a rounded rectangle, and this one has corners that are a little too harsh, so I'm going to adjust those with these red handles, make them more rounded off. Like that. Kind of. All right, and looking at this thumb, again, it could be an oval, but I think I'm going to go again with the rounded rectangle. And this looks like kind of a longer one. Again, I'm going to round it off a little bit, maybe not as much as I did the other, because it still kind of looks like a rectangle there. And then as I put these close to each other, I see they kind of need to angle a little bit away from each other. So the thumb is angling a little bit this way. The fingers are going to angle a little bit in the other direction, like this, maybe. And next I'm going to look at this little cuff on the bottom. It could be a rectangle, could be a rounded rectangle. I'm going to go with rounded rectangle again to make the cuff. And as I'm looking, I want to see how wide does this cuff need to be. So it looks to me like the cuff is not as wide as the top of the mitten. And I know on my hand, if I spread my fingers out like a glove, my wrist is definitely narrower than the top of my hand. So I want to make sure this is a little narrower. And not too tall. Trying to get everything in proportion. I'm going to start thinking about how these come together. Now obviously the mitten has a continuous line between the thumb and the cuff there. If I look right here, it continues down. There's not a gap. But I think I can fix that with point editing. Let me just kind of scooch this down a little bit. Got a basic shape. I feel like my thumb might need to be a little bit taller. Are you kind of seeing a basic mitten shape there? Kind of blur your eyes a little bit. So to make these shapes easier to work with, help myself visualize a little bit better, I'm going to color them in so that I kind of get an idea. It's almost looking like a mitten. There's still some work to do. In fact, I think I can round this top part off a little bit more. We're close, guys. All right, so I'm liking the way this is looking. I'm thinking I'm probably getting ready to weld here. Still just kind of tweaking as I go. But I'm thinking I might be ready to weld. So here's what I'm going to do. My rule of thumb is before I weld shapes together, I always make a copy. And the reason I do that is, for one thing, it can help me see how I made the shape that I was making. That's why I ended up with these shapes here from the copies that I kept when I made a mitten before. But also, making a copy means if I mess something up or I need to go back at some point to what I started with, I will have the original shapes there. So, look one more time. That thumb looks a little funky here, but you know, I think it's okay. All right, so I'm going to make a copy. I'm going to Alt, click and drag to make a copy. Just put it off to the side. And then I think I'm going to weld together. And I think what I'm going to do is weld these top two pieces together. And I am not ready to weld this bottom piece yet. In fact, let me change it to a little bit different color. Because, I hate the way that looks. Because I may want to make that be a contrast detail on the final mitten. Have the cuff be a different color. We'll see. We'll see what I'm going to do. All right, so as I'm looking at this, I'm pretty close here on the shape, but I need to take care of this area down here where I have a gap. And so I'm going to zoom in here. And what I think I want to do is get rid of this little rounded area and fill in this gap. And to do that, I'm going to use point editing. So there are two ways to enter point editing. You can either select the shape and then click on the point editing icon on the side here, or you can also just double click the shape to enter point editing. So these points are a connect the dot that are determining how this outline of this shape is formed. It will help me to be able to see the red outline. So I'm going to change my fill color that I've used here to a lighter color so that I'll be able to see those point editing red lines a little bit better. See what I mean? So let me come back in over here and tell you a little about what's going on here. So this point is a connect the dot with this point. And this point is controlling the curve. That's why this section is lit up red when I select this point. And this little handle is controlling what kind of curve I've got. I remember I said I wanted to get rid of this curve. If I delete this point, it's going to make this a connect the dot with this. That may even be kind of a little bit harsher curve than I have now. So what I think I'm going to do is maybe drag this down here a little bit. And then delete these 2 points that are now making the top of this come up out of the cuff of the mitten. And then I want to come out and see how that looks. Ooh, guys, that looks a lot better. Okay, so this little cuff. I'm glad I kept the cuff separate when I did the welding because I think that will be good to be able to adjust that as I go. Now, I think as I'm looking at this mitten here, I'm just noticing how this is kind of nipped in right here, like the elastic is squeezing in a little bit on the thinner part of the wrist. And as I'm looking at my own wrist, I see it does get a little narrower right next to my hand. I might want the top of this cuff to be a little narrower than the bottom. Now, I can't do that the way it is right now, because right now it's one of these auto shapes. It has these handles on it that let me adjust the curvature of the rounded rectangle. So what I'm going to do is I need to actually turn this into a regular shape, not an auto shape. Release it from being something I can edit over here with these handles. So I'm going to right click and do convert to path. That makes it into a regular shape, and now I can double click it and do point editing. So let me get in a little bit closer here and double click, and I said that I wanted the top to be a little bit nipped in and narrower than the bottom. So I'm just going to grab these kind of pieces that are at the top. I don't want it to get too squeezed around the corner here. I'll try these in a little. And just a little bit, kind of nip it in. Another nice thing about doing a little bit of point editing when you're making a custom shape is, at least I think is a good thing, is that it keeps your shape from looking too perfect. If you've made it out of, rectangles and ovals and circles, it can look a little bit too perfect, and real life items aren't perfect. So it can be good to do a little bit of point editing and make it a little bit imperfect. I'm not liking, now that I have adjusted that, I like how it's nipped in. I'm not liking how this little angle looks here. That's something I was messing with. So I'm going to try changing that to a smooth curve and see if that helps it look a little bit better. That's a little bit better. That maybe. And then I might make the other side do something similar. Oh yeah, I'm liking the way that looks. Alright. Maybe not have this quite so nipped. Okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now I'm looking at the top of this thumb. I think mine looks a little too squared off, so I'm going to also adjust that with a little bit of point editing. I think what I'll do is, let's try this. I'm going to get rid of one of these points and make the other one a smooth curve. Again, I don't want it to be too perfect looking, because real objects aren't perfect. So it's a little lopsided. That's kind of a good thing in my mind. Up here too, I might do a little bit of tweaking. Just to kind of get the shape that I want. I think that there's a kind of a smooth transition here as this part of the mitten goes down into the cuff there. And mine has a little too much of a angle there. So I'm going to come in and fix that a little bit, do a little more point editing on this pink piece. I think I'm going to turn this piece into a corner, this point into a corner. Let's see. And I know you can't see what I'm doing. It's behind the cuff. Let me move the cuff out of the way so you can see a little bit better. So what I'm trying to do is kind of make the bottom round it off a little bit. And then see if I put that in approximately the right place. I pretty much did. And then kind of make this mitten enter the cuff a little bit more smoothly. I might want this cuff to be an easy bit wider. Like that. And I'm a perfectionist, so you may be more or less of a perfectionist than me. As I go through this process, I would probably be refining it, more. I see a little point here that's a little weird bump that I would probably change on mine, but you let your level of perfectionism determine how much you want to get into that. All right, I'm going to change this back to all one color so I can start to get an idea if this is the shape that I'm thinking. I think it looks pretty good. I've got my thumb a little more open than this one has, and that's okay. I think that makes it a little clearer. I do see this as a super straight line right here, and as I look at my own hand, there's a little bump right here where my knuckle is. And I would like to show that a little bit better on the mitten. I mean, I don't want it to be big, but I do want there to be a little bit of a bump there. Let's see. That's a little better, not quite as razor straight line. All right, I'm liking the way this mitten looks. Here's what I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking that I liked having the different color cuff. Let's see, I'm going to go with kind of maybe a burgundy mitten and a dark blue cuff. Ooh, maybe I should do some sort of fur cuff. Anyway, I'm liking the way the contrast looks there. However, I don't want to just have two pieces where you have to manually eyeball where that cuff goes. So what I think I'm visualizing I would like to have, still tweaking it as I talk, I hope that is okay. What I think I would like to have is maybe one shape that encompasses the outline of both the back part of the mitten, the hand part, and the cuff, and then a separate piece I can put over the top as the cuff. And that way it'll have a place for that cuff to line up on top of. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, you'll see in just a minute. So what I'm going to do, are you visualizing how this is going to look and what I'm going to need to do? For that back piece, I need a shape that is the weld of the two pieces together. That's going to give me the whole shape. But if I weld, I get rid of this front piece. And I don't want to get rid of it. I want to have another one I can put on the top. So what I need is two of these cuff pieces. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do my Alt click again, but instead of dragging away like I usually do, I'm going to do Alt and click without moving my mouse. And I'm going to show you that actually made me another copy right on top of where the first one was. Then that one piece is selected. I don't want to drag and select all the pieces because I've got two cuffs under there and I don't want to select them both. I'm going to select one of them, select my mitten, and then, oh, you know what? I was about to hit weld, but I just remembered my own rule, which I already told you. Before I weld anything, I always make a copy of my work in progress. Now I'm ready. Okay, select the cuff, select the mitten, weld. Hey, the cuff disappeared. It really didn't. It's behind the weld. When you weld, you bring your welded piece to the front. So I'm going to right click and send this to the back. There's my cuff. And now I have two pieces. One piece that's the back, and it shows me where to place the cuff on the front of it. And I think that's pretty much my finished product. I might even like it better than my original mitten that I made last time. So I hope you can see the big lesson that I want you to get out of this is that you don't always have to trace. You don't always have to copy exactly what somebody else did or exactly a piece of clip art. You can approximate it and make it your own, and then you've got your own original design that was inspired by something else instead of being an exact copy. So I hope this was a helpful tutorial to you. It's a little bit long. Sorry about that. But I hope you'll come back and get some more So What tutorials another time. Thanks, guys. Bye.